What is the Buddhist understanding or belief for accepting someone's death and understanding where they are now? If you don't know me, my name is Bradley Marcus. I study, practice, and teach Theravadan Buddhism here on TikTok. And I'm going to tell you and explain to you what a Theravadan Buddhist believes happens after you die, as well as give you some tips on how to accept a friend's death. And at the end of the video, I'm going to teach you how Christianity and Buddhism aren't so different when it comes to what happens after you die. And then I'm going to explain to you how enlightenment is similar to that of heaven in Christianity. So the first thing I would say to you, if you lost a loved one, is that grief is really hard, like really, really hard. I lost a really close friend of mine to a freak accident. He was only 29 last October, or the October before rather. And I really learned how to grieve in that experience. And unfortunately, grieving is something that we all have to go through, but nobody is taught how to do it. So I made a video on how to grieve. You can find that by searching that on TikTok with my name. But basically, the main point I want to say is that grief is hard, and we need to allow space to grieve. It's extremely important, because if we don't, then we internalize it and then eventually traumatize ourselves. Side note, grief is not just if somebody passes away. You could have grief for a lifestyle that you once wanted to live. You could have grief for an idea that is no longer there. You can have grief for many different things. So after you give yourself some space to grieve, you want to allow yourself to feel those feelings fully and wholly. This looks like maybe going through some old photos that you and your friend had, crying over them, journaling about them, missing them. If you're familiar with the 5 stages of grief, you can be angry. You can find yourself bargaining with a higher power to bring them back. You can find yourself in disbelief. You can find yourself very sad, which you have to be careful with. We'll get to that in a second. And then finally, you'll find acceptance. But the truth is, you can run through these 5 stages back and forth in many different orders. What I was saying about sadness is we want to be careful not to get too sad, because we might be able to fall into a depressive state, and that can lead to more problems, and we don't want anybody grieving you. So feel sad, but again, understand that you're having that experience and just hold space for it. This is also where a meditation practice will be very helpful, because as we meditate, we practice on observing our thoughts and distancing ourselves from them, not being identified with them, not engaging with them, not becoming them. The best example or analogy for this is when we meditate, we're watching cars, which are our thoughts, passing by. We just want to watch them pass. We don't want to jump in the car and let the driver take us wherever it wants to go, to Sadnessville or Depressionville or Anxietyville. Now, if we do jump in that car, that's fine. We just jump out and let the car pass. Main point here, though, is that we are still experiencing our grief. We are not pushing it away. We are not looking at the car. We're just watching it happen. We're feeling our grief fully. But at the same time, we're not spinning with our grief. We're not disengaging with it and pretending like it's not there, which a lot of people do, but we're not engaging with it so much that we find ourselves in a depressed state. Does that make sense? Now, once you've done that and we've practiced experiencing our grief, side note, it's also good to do this with other loved ones, people who may have known that person who passed away. We can talk a bit more about what happens after you die in Buddhist beliefs. We're already 3 minutes in, so if you're still here, that's great. In Buddhist beliefs, we believe in reincarnation. That's the first thing. But what gets reincarnated isn't a soul, because a soul is kind of saying that you are this one thing. You are just this block of whatever energy, and you're just going to move from this body to this body to this body. When in fact, the Buddhists, especially Theravadan Buddhists, look at this essence of us more like a stream of water. We are constantly moving, constantly shifting, constantly blending. And the Dalai Lama has been quoted by saying that when we pass, it's almost equivalent to taking a cup of water and pouring it on the ground. Now, when my friend who passed away, I actually felt his actual passing. So what I mean by that is he unalived, right? But he was still around me and a lot of friends and family for up to a month after that. He was just not being able to be seen. He was in the alternate reality, the alternate dimension, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. But I could feel him, and I spoke to him many times. And pieces of him, in my opinion, are actually still here to this day. I see them sometimes in birds. I see them sometimes in clouds. I see like a random hat on the street while I'm skateboarding. We used to like to skate together, and like it looked like his hat. It's like a little piece, a fractal of him is still here. But a majority of him has what I call moved on into the rest. Back into the rest of consciousness, collective consciousness. Now, depending on his karma, or kama in my tradition, Theravadan tradition, we call it kama, will depend on how he is reborn. So you pass, then you really pass about up to 40 days after. And again, I believe pieces are left behind, but depending on his karma will depend on where he goes next. There's many different realms in Buddhism, many different hell realms and heaven realms. There's also the animal realm and the hungry ghost realm, which is for another video. You can also look these up, the realms in Buddhism. But the main point is that afterwards, they are reborn. Now, if they did great in their lives, they might be reborn into a heaven realm and live there for tens of thousands of years in deep meditation, happiness, and bliss with absolutely nothing to worry about. At the same time, they could be born into a hell realm. And in the hell realm, they just need to use up all of their bad karma or kama. Look at it like a gas tank. Everything you do, you're building good or bad karma, and you need to fill, and it's filling up a gas tank of good and bad karma. So eventually, when you go to, let's say, the hell realm, now you're going to be depleting that bad gas, if you will. And then once you do that, you'll be reborn into a better place. Now, if you're in the hell realm, a better place can be any of the other realms, really. The animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and even the human realm. But one important thing when it comes to Buddhism, and this is going to get me to my part of Christianity and how Buddhism and Christianity are somewhat related. When you are a human, born in the human realm, only then can you attain enlightenment. So even when you're born as a deva and you are in one of the higher heaven realms, you still cannot escape samsara. Samsara is the cycle of death and rebirth. Look at samsara as the matrix. You want to escape the matrix? Well, you can only do it by being a human. So if you are in the heaven realm, then eventually once you use your good karma and you pass, you'll come back into a lower realm and you'll have a chance to attain enlightenment. The funny thing about Christianity and Buddhism is that they both preach being a good person, right? Or Catholicism or any religion for that matter, right? They're all kind of saying the same thing. Be a good person. The difference that I find is in Buddhism, it really trains you how to be a good person because at its core are principles on how to be a good person, how to let go of attachment, greed, hatred, things like this, and using your meditation practice to help you do so. Living a life of right action, right speech, right livelihood, right mindfulness. These are all things taught in Buddhism, and it's literally like a blueprint on how to become enlightened. So how I see some connection with Christianity is it's about being a good person to attain a higher goal. The difference is with Buddhism is it's much more strict, at least from my understandings. Again, I haven't studied too much Catholicism or Christianity, but from what I've learned growing up in Western civilization, Buddhism is like way more strict because it literally takes tens of thousands of lifetimes to get to a place just to where you can try to attain enlightenment. Being born as a human is one of the most powerful things, one of the most precious things in Buddhism because you can finally give a chance. You finally have a chance to try to attain enlightenment. Furthermore, if you are here and still with me and you're learning about the Dhamma through my TikTok or on your own volition, you are even that much more fortunate. The Buddha actually had an analogy that if you're a human and you have understood or are passionate about the Dhamma or even just came in contact with the Dhamma, that is about as rare as a turtle who sits on the bottom of the seafloor for 100, 200 years, brings his head up for the first time, and immediately gets his head caught in a fisherman's noose, just by chance. And there are enlightened monks who say that when they become enlightened, they have seen their past lives, tens of thousands of unalived bodies of their own, stacked on top of one another, seeing all these past lives in the understanding that they had to take that path and they had to work very hard year after year, or lifetime after lifetime, to just be lucky enough to be human and then practice enough to become enlightened. So where is your friend or loved one now? Well, I believe pieces of them are still with us, always. But I also believe that just like that water, just like that stream, parts of them have moved on into the next life. Depending on their karma depends on where they lead next. But here's another last thing I'll leave with you. It is said that everyone will eventually become a Buddha, because with enough lifetimes, with enough practice, with enough chances, they will get there.